Imagine this. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings. This is your house. But is it your home? Hi, I'm Nelson DeMello, and join me as we try to find our home beyond our borders.
I don't know. I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's a good take.
I think that is very dishonest. I think that it is just not a viable way of reading through the Bible. It lacks context. It lacks a lot of things, and they hammer down on these opinions and ideas. I don't think it's for any logical, any honest reason. I think that it is really just a dysfunction of the heart, a hate towards God, that they do that. Now, there's a group of people that's also on the other side of this that I don't want to name quite yet because I don't want to spoil anything, but they have the same lack of context. They have the same lack of reverence, maybe a lack of understanding, but I'll leave it at that. Today I want to go through number 7, and I was gonna make a joke, man. Is it 6? No, dude, I gotta get out of these numbers, man. But so Numbers 7, it's seemingly a boring chapter. I'll give you the context of the chapter. I'm gonna have to give you context of everything in a second, but essentially, I think the tent of meeting. So God's tabernacle is there. They're all camped. They're setting the tent of meeting, and all the tribes are willingly giving an offering to the Lord. They all equally give the same thing. It's like 130 shekel silver plate. It's like a 70 shekel something, a young bull, a young lamb, for the sin offering. Okay, right? So they're all giving the same exact offering, all 12 tribes. So there's like inequality amongst them and this and that. I'm not sure. Like the Bible does not describe whether they made like a deal or something, like, hey guys, let's all come together and equally give, or if it was like a coincidence or whatever the case was, right? But that's what they did. And then it says that once they consecrated everything and received all the offerings, then God spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting. So that's where we are. Let me read the verse that we're gonna look at. It's verse 89. It says, "And when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from above the mercy seat that was on the ark of the testimony, from between the 2 cherubim, and it spoke to him." Okay, so this is what we're looking at. Let me get my notes just in case. So the people that I was referring to is it's kind of I don't know. It doesn't quite have to be atheistic. I mean, some people, like a layman scholar with baggage. Let me give you an example. When I made a video earlier that talked about the slavery that is talked about in Leviticus and Exodus, and what they were saying is essentially their argument was, hey, you're always trying, like, not you, but like apologists are always trying to defend what's evil in the Bible and this and that, and you've got it all wrong, and the Bible condones slavery and its abuse and this and that. And we just went back and forth, maybe 4 or 5 messages, and then I was like, dude, you're just not gonna understand. You don't want to understand. Like you actually have a bias against Bible, against God, and it's not an intellectual thing. You're not being unbiased about this. And essentially what that kind of looked like was he was trying to make the argument that, we can beat slaves and this and that, and they won't be like, and that's totally fine. And then I was showing them in the same verse, sometimes I'd have to use another verse that essentially said that, like, if you make any permanent damage on a slave, you have to let them go and they can live amongst you and be, a first class citizen. I showed that. I showed that he was trying to argue that like the word slavery was different between Hebrew slaves and foreign slaves, and that distinction is made, but it's not necessarily in like it's used in the words. But then when I would use verses that would talk about foreign slaves, he'd be like, no, that's referring to Hebrew slaves and da da da. And I was just like, dude, you're being inconsistent. You're being illogical. You're not being fair here. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's even like laws that say if the slave wants to stay in the family permanently, then you have to mark them, the way you would mark a cattle. Like that's the language it's used. And then the logic is, well, if there were slaves that wanted to stay slaves with their masters, one must assume that the life that they had was not bad, right? Um, so and then there's laws that protect them from when they run away. So if a Hebrew was like a bad master to a slave, and the slave was like, I can't do this anymore, and runs away, there were cities that they could run to, and they would be protected by law, by God's law. They would be protected from those slave masters, and they would be free. And so there was just a system that did protect slaves, like, and that's not like because I'm Christian I'm defending this. It's like I would be dishonest if I were to read this and think, oh God, like yeah, that's the thing. It's like he did condone slavery for its time and for its context, but he also protected them. That was the working class of the time. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like that it is what it is. And he was trying to make the argument. Like, I understand that he knows the apologetic argument for the whole slavery thing, and he is against it or whatever. But the fact is like, yeah, maybe they sum it up in like a 2 sentence thing, but like there's a whole study behind saying those 2 sentences, right? And walking through that, like you can clearly see that, right? That the transatlantic slave trade was not the same as what was going on in the Old Testament. And that's like super duper clear. Like even the New Testament wasn't the same, Um, so yeah, so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about here. And so what's the problem with verse 89? Well, verse 89, it says that it spoke to him. You might read that. Well, you might not see it this way, but maybe someone who has that bias will say that it spoke to him. It is referring to God, right? And God is an it. And so God is the tabernacle. God is, the tent of meeting. The God is whatever. And that will be their argument. And I just kind of want to like walk through, like kind of almost be a devil's advocate in a sense, not too deep, because I mean it's a really bad argument to make, but these are the kinds of things that they would do. And so essentially they would look at this verse and say that either God is an it, right? It's an idol, it's an object, right? The ark, the cherubim, whatever the case is, right? They might say that it is an angel. This is like a minority scholarly opinion, where it is an angel that manifests itself in the tent of meeting to speak to Moses. And then the other thing that has a little more meat to it, which has to there's, how would I say this? it requires more study, more background to fight against, is this idea of ambiguous monotheism. Okay, ambiguous monotheism is this idea that like God just manifests himself in objects, right? So they would look at the burning bush, for example, and be like, see, it's not that God is God, it's that, objects talk to him, that's how God communicates, is through objects, right? Through idols and through these things, kind of like every other ancient Near Eastern religion, right? So we look at like Dagon, for example. He was like this weird like statue thing that was hung on the wall, and we read that in Chronicles or something, when they God and Dagon basically duke it out, and Dagon's like this pathetic idol that keeps falling on the floor, right? But that's kind of the deal. Like that's the these are the interpretations, right? Now, I'm saying them out loud. Maybe you're like, maybe and you're like, oh my gosh, these are the worst arguments ever. And maybe this was an easier verse to kind of tackle and break down and be like, no, dude, this is silly. But I don't know why, but my brain goes there. Like my brain catches these things. Like when I go through the book of John, I catch these things all the time, like seeming contradictions, seeming like words and phrases that like, oh well, this implies this, and oh my gosh, that destroys, like, oh no, what's going on, and I think that probably just has it has to do with like my fear of like intellectual incompetence. So it's like, how could I have missed that, and I really spiral in that direction a lot of times. And so when I read verses like this, I'm like, oh my God, it's over. Like I've put all my eggs in this basket, and the basket wasn't even real, like I just dropped eggs on the floor. Like this is ridiculous. What's going on? And so I've just been adept to doing this exercise of like refuting myself, of going through and trying to understand, and like taking a breath, taking a beat, just being like, wait a second, how can this? No, this can't be. Like my mind went there. I don't know why, and I'll explain why. So again, if this is the only verse that existed, right? If this was the Bible, it was just this verse. It says that it spoke to him. Then yeah, maybe this would be a very confusing thing to look at. But when we see one, like God spoke to Adam, walked with Adam, right? That's like the literal verb there. He walked in the cool of the evening. Okay, when you see that he talks to Abraham, he talks to Isaac, Jacob. He wrestles with Jacob. He talks, to Isaac. He's there with Joseph. He does the miracles of the 10 plagues with Moses. Speaks through the burning bush. He talks to him face to face. Like there are events, like supernatural events. There are conversations that he has. There are like just moments of supernatural that don't confine him to object, that don't confine him to this place, right? And we have to consider that, like, these one-off things means that, not that the verbiage is wrong or whatever, but that our first reading, our first pass through is just wrong. Like the way we're interpreting it is just wrong. And so if we have this context of, wait a second, no, but God has always been like omnipresent, divine, like otherworldly, supernatural everywhere else, why would he'd be referred to as an idol, as an it? Like that doesn't make sense, right? And then the angel thing, like there's just no angel mentioned. Moses keeps tabs. He's always like, he's not gonna miss out on something like that, like that's just not the case. And and in Numbers, what we also see is that so far everything God has done has been to entirely set himself apart from every other god. I didn't really get into this last chapter or last episode because I really wanted to get into like the whole abortion thing, but the way he structures the camp, right, is antithetical to how all the ancient Near Eastern cultures would do it. And what I mean is, usually the king is in the center, right? And I mean, in this sense, it is the king, right, in the center. But what I mean is, from the outside looking in, they are a pure theocracy, right? They have, the God in the center and the priests surrounding it, where in a normal camp, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, whatever, you have the king there, you have its guards around or whatever, and then maybe some, other royalties, whatever, and then the camp or whatever, and somewhere there is like their gods or whatever. And so that's like one huge stark contrast. That the fact that they don't eat pork, like the fact that these commands, really set them apart. And we've talked about how, like, hey, like even again going back the laws of slavery, that sets them apart entirely. That about giving dignity to the lowest social class there, right? That's one thing. Child sacrifices, right? Again, we talked about how all the other cultures, they sacrifice their children to gods, where God is saying, no, the Levites are my portion. Don't do that. Sacrifice a lamb instead. And so he, every step of the way, he's distinguishing himself. He is setting himself apart from everything else around him. And this idea also, like, hold on to that idea, right? So he's distinguishing himself. He is, how would I say this? Not paving a way for his holiness. He is expressing his holiness. No, he's making his holiness clear in this, right? But this is going to build up to a huge climax way later on, and I want you to like think about this as we go through Numbers. So he's completely set himself apart, and so why then? Like even from a naturalistic, like, historical perspective, if Moses, right, is just this prophet that charismatic spiritual leader, if that's all that's going on here, well, he's still distinguishing from anything else around. It's revolutionary what Moses is doing here. And so you have to consider, or you don't have, not that you have to consider, you have to understand that in that, why would he then all of a sudden do what everyone else is doing, right? If he is distinguished from any other religion around, why would then he'd be like, oh yeah, the cherubims in the ark spoke to me? Like that doesn't make sense, right? And so let's look at this verse again. Let's read it, and we'll see what we can do. And when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from above the mercy seat that was on the ark of the testimony, from between the two cherubim, and it spoke to him. All right. Yeah, maybe I won't spend too much time with like trying to build more tension, but it here is simply the voice of God. That's it's super anticlimactic. But that's the thing, right? It's the simple answer is always the right one. Here, you refer, a voice is a noun, right? God is, I mean, I guess he's been referred to as him, right? God is he. His voice is an it. That's just, that's how nouns work, right? I wouldn't say like my voice, oh no, my voice, she's raspy. That's or he's raspy, it's it. My voice is like it's raspy, and it's really that simple. There's nothing really like wild going on here. Now, which is probably how you read it, right? I'm just, again, like a freak in that and trying to like, oh no, I've done it again where I put all my eggs in one basket. But the scene here is that you have all the offerings are done. He goes inside the tent of meeting, and then the space between, so imagine like, it's a box or whatever, and then you have the two cherubim coming out, and right in the middle, the empty space, there's a voice coming out, and that is speaking to Moses. That's kind of cool. It's like I have Sauron, except it's not an I, it's sound waves. It's like a nothingness that sound is coming out of. That's freaking crazy. That's the picture. That's the setting that we're in. And so that's that, right? On the other side of the coin, though, you'll have. Let me just if I can just preach a little bit, I'll show you. So you have the people of God offering to the Lord in gladness, in joy, right? And God responds, and he speaks, and the presence of God comes and is with Moses and leads the people. That is BS, and that's wrong. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so the other side of the coin are preachers in the same vein, in the same vanity. They miss context and they want to preach what you want to hear. And that's the ironic thing, right? Like, let's be honest. Like, we don't want to do things that we don't want to do. I mean, duh. But there is a sense, right? Like, oh, I don't want to serve the Lord. I don't want to do these things, but I have to. I must, right? And in that, like, so that's kind of the thing. When I make the argument of like this kind of religion is what you want it to be, I don't mean that it's easy for you anyways, or convenient for you anyways. But the fact of the matter is when we read through the Gospels, when we look at human psychology, we want to work towards redemption. We want to do the work of redemption. Whether it's, redeeming our character, redeeming our life, redeeming whatever, we want to do the work. And so this is common preaching, right? This is very common preaching of, hey, you put in the work, you put in the sacrifice, and God's going to honor that, and God's going to do it for you, right? I'm sorry, it's broken, right? I'm going to use the same context for the other thing that I did here. God spoke to Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve was literally doing nothing. They just existed, right? Abraham called out for no apparent reason. God just saw Abraham, was like, you're the guy. And Abraham was like, okay, I guess. And like, we call him the father of faith. He wasn't even that faithful. Like, he went along with it long term, right? With God's plans. But like, every step of the way he messed up, right? He like tried to give off his wife twice. He tried to, he had this whole thing with Ishmael, right? Like, it just all the way through, like, he had these mistakes. He messed up. and so on. Like you look at the story of Jacob, you go through the story of Joseph. You know, these people, they were flawed, and they didn't really deserve anything, right? And again, they spoke, or God spoke to these people without a tent of meeting, without the offerings, without the sacrifices. And so why would this one case be the case? Like why would, if we understand what's going on since the beginning of the Bible till now, right? Which isn't that far, you know. Why would all of a sudden we start preaching like that? That's it's misguided and it's wrong. And you're thinking, okay, well, then what? Then what? Well, like I've mentioned before, with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob, with Joseph, with all these people, God has a plan, and we become the instruments to fulfilling his plan, right? God chose Moses because he had, because God saw the right heart, the right mind, the right capabilities, the right, all of that. And we sit here and think that we can earn something. And like, I don't, that's, I can hear how that might be discouraging, I think, to some people, at least in terms of like calling and ministry. I think, and even I deal with this in the sense of like, well, I just feel this thing in my heart that I'm supposed to do something like just, whoa, and you're telling me that God might not even want me to do it. And I'm just like fooling myself or whatever the case is. I do want to say though that I think God works like Psalm 37:4 says, delight in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. And we think that means that if we love God, then he'll give us like the things that we want. Well, first of all, it's a circular argument if you think about it that way, which is, well, if you love God, if you're delighting in the Lord, then all you're getting is more of the Lord, right? Like if you're delighting in the Lord and he gives you delight in the Lord and he'll give you, oh shoot, I forgot it. But if he gives you the things inside of your heart and you're delighting in the Lord, then what is in your heart is the Lord. So you're just getting more of the Lord. And that's a circular thing, right? Which, hey, if you want to interpret that way and you understand that, then yeah, sure. Because most people are like, oh, I delight in the Lord. Now where's my Ferrari? It's like, well, you're not delighting in the Lord if you still desire a Ferrari more than his presence, So that's one way to interpret it. The other way to interpret it is that when you delight in the Lord, he actually gives you desires. He actually puts things in your heart. Where I'm going with that is, I think that there is this interplay with God that as we walk out our faith and as we start understanding and discerning God's plan and vision and wisdom, we start desiring the things that God desires for us. And what that means in this context is that Moses had the anointing, also had the desire to position himself for that anointing, right? So like, this we can get into envy of people's ministry and stuff like that, and just on the opposite end, like just our calling. So I guess I'll start with that. So our calling. Let me actually pause here. Wait, hold up. If at any point in this you said, "Hey, I never thought about it like that," please subscribe. What are you doing, man? I'm trying to pay my bills. Okay, anyways, let's get back to the serious stuff. All right, see it. So our calling, for example, let's use something small, right? Like singing or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this, I haven't seen this happen. I've heard of this happen. It might actually be happening behind the scenes, but whatever. So let's say you sing, and let's say you're a decent singer. You know, you're not the best, you're not the worst. You're on tune. You don't have that voice. You don't have the timbre, right? But God has called you, right? And let's say God has called you to serve, and you feel this thing of like, oh man, I just want, to bless my community. I want to worship with them. I want to lead them in worship and this and that, right? And like that becomes like on your one-on-one time with God, that is what that looks like. God gives you these desires and passions for your local church, and you're there, right? Now let's say there's another singer that is just fantastic, amazing, right? And she or he is is in the same position as you, but feels called to maybe make her music as an artist, to maybe like borrow her voice for the churches around, do all this stuff, right? and and that is her calling, that is her, like, her direction. She's how would I say, that's her workload. She's training, she's doing all the things, she's positioning herself for that, right? In a perfect world, that's how it stays, right? Where there's no interaction between, oh, what is she doing, why is she over there, why does she get to, why does she, that in a perfect world won't doesn't happen, because why? You're focused on you and God. That's it. You and God. What happens, and that I think this is where people start getting upset, people start getting bitter, is comparison, right? It's, oh, why does she have this? Oh, but she forgets lyrics. So I don't forget lyrics, and this and that. And you start nitpicking the things that maybe you're good at that they're bad at. And you don't recognize that it's just all about mission, and all about God's glory, and all about what He decides to do to achieve that, right? And so we look at ministry, and we think that it's like this popularity contest that we see. We think that it's like this thing of gift and ability, and it's really just about God's, like, plan. And I say arbitrary in the sense that, like, he just decides, it, again, like, we see in Christianity that it's not like the smartest who believe, it's not the strongest who believe, it's not the most humble who believe, it's not like the cleanest people that believe, not the most moral people who believe. There's no rhyme or reason to the group of people that call themselves Christian. And in the same way, there's no rhyme or reason why God decides to choose people, right? Like, we can see the wisdom in it, and we can retrospectively look back and be like, oh yeah, he was a fantastic choice, whatever. Um, but like Tom Brady, you know, he was like, I forgot what round he was in. Like, nobody wanted him. He became the greatest QB of all time, and that is kind of like how we see, oh, Paul, man, he had dual citizenship, he spoke a bunch of languages, he was at the Sanhedrin, da, 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 da. We're like, oh yeah, that's fantastic. He was also, a jerk, and no one liked to work with him. There was like three people his whole life that was like okay with working with him, you know. And so yeah, I mean, sure, like, yeah, he had the qualities, but like no one, kind of nobody really liked him, and it's just that thing of like, we don't see the full story, we don't see what's going on, and we're like, oh yeah, that's the great pick, or oh dude, that's an ugly pick, like, why would you ever do that? But we don't know what God has in store. And I think it's just really hard then. And I felt this about like people who are in places to communicate the gospel that I don't think communicate it well enough, or creative enough, or like, they don't impact culture enough when that's exactly the position they're in. But that would be putting myself in God's shoes and saying, like, and deciding, whether or not this person's worthy or good enough or has enough utility, you know. And that's not up to me. And so we look at our calling as a thing of mercy and grace, and God's not going to undervalue or overvalue you. You know, God has a perfect plan for your life. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing is like the Moses anointing comes at a greater responsibility. I think it's Luke 12. I think. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes again. So if I, yikes. Luke 12:48. From everyone who has been giving much, much will be demanded, and from those who has been entrusted with much more will be asked. That becomes the burden of someone with anointing, with talent. That becomes the burden of someone with, I think in this day and age we value intellect and the mind, and so that's the burden that comes with being smart, and being an expert and being really good at something, is that much will be demanded of that person when they're, and I don't know if you know this, but we're all going to be judged. Christians, non-Christians, like you're like, oh, but the blood of Jesus, yeah, we won't be condemned, but we will be judged. Like there will be a rap sheet at the end of our life, that Jesus is gonna, audit. And of course, from what I understand of the Bible, it's not going to be so much of, hey, Tuesday, May 25th of 2003, you did, you stole 2 lollipops from that barbershop. Like, what are you going to do? I don't think it's going to be that, but I think it's going to be, hey, were you faithful? Were you a good steward? Did my love transform your life? And did you impact the people around you? And did you, like, again, I don't think it's it's not going to be this checklist audit kind of deal, but it's going to be an audit of, did my life reflect, did my life reflect God's like transformative power to myself and to those around me? And was that spread as much as it could? Was that yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just a different form of a to-do list, but I don't. But it's a different different categories. I think, we were worried about how many cuss words we used and if we stopped smoking and all these things, and like that's all secondary, I think, to advancing God's kingdom in our hearts, in our families, in our communities. And my point with that, is that those who are given much will be demanded, right? So Lecrae has a huge demand on his life because of the position he's in, the talent that he has, the vision he has, right? Because all of that has been given by God, and he says, okay, well, did you steward it well? Did you do what you were supposed to? As opposed to me, as opposed to you, it's like he can affect hundreds of thousands of people. We can affect a couple hundred people. Did we do our part, right? I had this debate with a friend of mine, where in discussion, right, of like what it means to be faithful, and he was like, "Oh, easy, you as many people you give to Christ, that determines your faithfulness." And then I pose the question of like, well, what if God just put it in your heart to just love on that one neighbor that everyone hates, and that has been your calling, like that you feel it in the depths of your soul, like I need to get this guy into heaven. And so you eat dinner, you make dinners for him, you eat dinners with him, and he's like, oh, this food sucks, and oh man, like what are you even doing here, and da da da. But he's here, right? You invited him, he came over, but he's still complaining about everything. He's just like this turd, bro. And just your whole life, you're there for him, you're loving on him, you're being compassionate, you're trying to sneak in Bible verses where you can, and preaching the gospel whenever you can. And you're just there for him. His wife dies, he gets more bitter, and you're still there. And he's becoming more of a pain in the neck. And, he gets old. Now you got to take care of him, And like close to the end of his life, he says, I've been an absolute turd to you. I've been the absolute worst human being on the planet, and you still loved me. Is this the God that you serve? And you're like, yeah. And he loves you way more. And he gives his life to Jesus, And at this point, let's say he's just 15 years older than you. At this point, he's dead at 85. You're 70 years old, right? And then let's say, a couple years later, you die in your sleep or something. Your whole life, you brought one person to Jesus. You're telling me that is not the same level of faith as someone who's brought thousands of people. Do you know what I mean? And so it really becomes like, what has God called me to do? And am I going to do it? Just you and God, and you and God. And that's it. There is no, like, as soon as you start looking at what other people are called to do, and what other people are capable of, and what other people, you're going to get bitter. Because sometimes it just doesn't look fair, right? But they are on their own journey. They're on their own path. They have their own struggles. Like, we can, I use Lecrae. Sorry, I mean, like, I know he gets a lot of bash, but I also love him, and I listen to him a lot, like podcasts and music. But like, let's say, okay, I would write better Christian lyrics, and be more, pro Jesus, and more obvious in that. And so it's like, that's one aspect. Okay, fine. And let's say you can even do it catchy, right? Which is its own conversation, right? Like, you can be a Christian artist. Like, there's a difference between a Christian artist and a whack artist. Paraphrasing Kendrick Lamar, kind of. You can still be whack and be very Christian in your music, right? But let's say you can do it like chef's kiss, like you're the poet of the century. Okay, well, there's still the temptation of having that kind of power and esteem, right? Where his DMs are probably like flooded with nudes and all these things. Could you deal with that? One, the business aspect, right? He's not just a rapper; he's an entrepreneur. He's making business decisions. Are you financially savvy like that? Are you good with money, right? And then he also has a family that he's taking care of. I don't have kids, right? Like, if I had to step into his shoes, could I be a good father, a good husband, a good entrepreneur, a good rapper, a good Christian? Can I be, a good mentor? Right now, this is another aspect of his life. He's mentoring the younger generation. He's mentoring other people. And you got to ask yourself, do you have the patience to deal with people that you are actively being a part of their lives that are like dim-witted, Like, there's so many facets to his life that you have to consider, and you're all you're thinking of is like one aspect. Oh man, his rap sucks and It's like, dude, but he's where he is for a reason, one. And two, he's got so much more. Like, maybe this is an aspect of compartmentalizing your faith even. Like your faith is compartmentalized. So you think his faith is compartmentalized. So you think all he does is do rap music, Christian rap music, and then he just lives like a normal person the rest of his life. Like, dude, he's through and through, you know? Like, one thing this man isn't, and I know this not because I know him personally, but I know his personality. He's an 8. 8s are congruent, man. If he didn't want to be a man of God, he wouldn't be a man of God. He would not care. Like, 8s have this thing about them, this external shell of I don't care what you think, and they do whatever they want, whatever it feels right to them. That's what they do. And I've been in so many arguments with people that are like that, and in the sense of like they just like when they think about what's right and wrong for them, they assume that everyone else functions the same way in terms of being like having autonomy, being what would you say, like my goodness, like having autonomy. So saying, hey, I don't want that, I don't like that, you know. So they're very communicative in that way. They put their foot down easily, and they also, the discipline that they have, and this is a more subtle thing, but like if they care about, you know, work, they'll put in 70 hours and they'll make time to party and but they put in that 70 hours, and it's whatever they put their mind to, they do. And I've been in a lot of arguments of like, hey, dude, I think your life is kind of, you know, swaying in a direction you might not want. And he's like, no, I'm in control. Don't worry about it. You know, I got this. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, people aren't gonna like you for this, and that. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Of course, internally, there's a whole bunch of like, oh, is everyone cool with me? Does everyone love me? You know, am I rejected? All this stuff, right? But my point is, this is Lecrae, right? Lecrae, whatever he puts his mind to, he's gonna do. He will upend his life and find a rhythm that works for him to get there. And so, seeing him do what he's doing, I can only assume that he's being congruent with the rest of his life. Like, one thing that 8s are not are hypocrites. You know, they will be in your face, like, yeah. So that's one thing that they are not, and that's 100%. Now, going back, I guess. So why did God then wait till then? Because honestly, the simple answer, it sets up for verse 8, for chapter 8, and that's really all it is, right? Like if we read Numbers 1, it starts with "and the Lord spoke," right? And the Lord spoke, and the Lord spoke, and that's just kind of how it goes. So it's not like the context of this story is they finished the tent of meeting because that's what the Lord told him to do. So they finished the tent of meeting, they sacrificed, you know, the offerings, they had fun, whatever, and then he needs direction for the next step. And so then the Lord spoke. That's literally all that's going on here, right? We try to interrupt the story to bring out these lessons that aren't there. Going all the way back, I'm sorry, yeah, we're talking about these pastors that try to earn your work by saying that is how you serve God, and that's how you receive more of God, is by serving. That's not it. That's it's really hard. Like, I wonder if pastors who do this, who preach this way, which is super common, I wonder if it's a fear that if you knew the truth of grace, if you knew the truth of the gospel, that maybe, like, if you intellectually knew, then maybe you would just not serve. Maybe you wouldn't tithe. Maybe you wouldn't do these things. And so they're scared of that. And if they're scared of that, they're going to preach this thing of, oh, but if you tithe, God will bless you. And if you serve, God will bless you and transform your life. It has utility to serve. Like there's utility in serving, there's utility in tithing. But that's not going to change the face of God. That's not going to... No way. Okay. Oh my gosh, sorry. I thought something happened. But that's not going to turn the face of God towards you. That's not how you win the heart of God. You win the heart of God with your faith by making space for him, by making space for him in your heart and making space for him in your day. And because, like, as a good father, when you ask for his attention, he'll give it to you. And whatever he's doing, if you interrupt him, he's going to turn his face to you. And that's all it takes. And so I know, like, it almost becomes a paradox, but it's because I harp on this because the striving needs to end. Like, this is like when Jesus says, right, come to me, all those who are heavy laden and burdened, and I'll give you rest, right? Jesus is saying that to these kinds of people, to people that are striving for God, that are trying to earn his love, trying to earn his ears and his eyes, and trying to earn his attention. God, Jesus, in that context, Jesus is saying, you don't need that. Just come to me. Just rest in me. Just be with me and rest. Relax. Take a load off. You don't need to earn God's attention. You don't need to earn God's anointing. You have it. You have a portion already. And you can't increase or decrease. I'm sorry. Like, that can unravel itself, right? And that's like a whole talk. Like, the other day I was like super bitter and I was praying, and it came down to this idea that, like, people are talented, and nowadays not a lot of people are skillful. Have all the talent, they have all the anointing, but they don't work it out, they don't hammer it out, they don't refine it, right? And I mean, that's, I think, why the quality of, like, secular music is on a decline. I think that's why pastors don't know their Bible. That's why, like, all of these things, because they have it, like pastors, for example, they have the ability to speak, they have the charisma, they have the jokes, they have the personality, but then they don't, but they're there to communicate truth. They're there to communicate, like, reality, like the spiritual reality, but they don't know the spiritual reality because they're not in the word. They're not studying. They're not, like, wrestling with the Bible. And so that's kind of where I want to end things. I mean, again, dude, you can't earn God's attention. You already have it, right? This is the prodigal son story. Like, you don't be the older brother here, right? Don't try to earn his favor. Don't try to earn his love, his attention. You already have it. You just need to position yourself in terms of, like right now, you can pause this and just be like, God, I want to hear you. God, I want to feel your presence. And guess what? You will. Like, don't be like, oh, I want to feel your presence. No? All right, cool. And then go back to listening to music or whatever. Like, give it a good old college try, Give it some time. And like I've taken vow of silences before of, like, no, I want to hear you speak. I'm not going to talk until you do. And I've been 2-3 days without talking. And, like, do that. Not that, man. I mean, unless you're called to, like, again, the idea comes in your head. And if that, if you're like, oh, actually, I want to try that, try it. Okay, fine. Yeah. Try it. Let's see what happens. Now he's not going to talk audibly. Like, for me, it was me waiting, whatever. And then a friend of mine, it was like a Bible study or something, and the words he spoke just, like, pierced through my soul. And I was like, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Like, that's exactly what I needed to hear. So, it was through a friend or whatever, but, like, it was like the exact words. But my point is like, it's just about positioning. It's about you turning your face towards him and being like, hey, hello, I'm right here. Like, uppies, come on. What are you doing here? Come on. Like, are you going to hold me or not, God? Are you God or not? And, dude, we, and this is the radical thing about grace. And like, you could have like freaking, I don't even know, man. Like all, dude, like all I can think of like, oh, what's considered sin? It's like freaking killing people and like, rape and all that stuff. But like, I don't know, dude. Let's say you just lied to your wife about something, or you like lied to your parents, or lied to, whatever. And you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. And you're like, and you think, oh, I'm so far from God. God has turned his face away from me. I'm a sinner, and da da da. Like, we don't understand about God's grace is that has already been paid for, right? Past, present, future have been paid for. The separation you feel is your ego separating from God. But God has not separated himself from you. And so we need to look, we can turn that, immediately turn our face to God. Be like, God, I don't know why I did that. You know why I did that. Or I do know why I did that. And I don't like that part. I don't want that part of me anymore to exist. And I just want to be in your presence. Or maybe that's not the dialogue you have but you're like, oh, I feel so bad. God, can you be here with me? And you're going to ask God to comfort you when you did the wrong. Really? Yeah. Yeah. Because what you might not understand yet is that we do things to protect ourselves. Like that is the dark part of our personality, is that the dark things we do, we're trying to protect parts of us that we feel like are too vulnerable to be exposed. And again, like, we're all children, man. We are all children. And so, yes, you do something wrong, go to God for love. Go to God for that. And he will be there. And he'll heal that. Like, slowly but surely, he will heal that. And so, like, we think we have to do all these things for an encounter, but all we have to do is just call out to him and just be available, be open. I promise you, dude. I remember in high school, like, when I was, I don't know, this is a really confusing time. But I remember there was one time, though, that I was like just listening to music. I think I heard someone say the same exact thing to me. And so in the middle of class, like, it was just free time. Yeah, I don't know why we had free time in high school, but we did. And so, they were all talking to each other. Some people were on their phones or whatever. And I just started praying. I was like, God, I just want to feel your presence here in this room. And I did, bro. And I was almost crying. And then this girl was like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, I honestly, I was just praying. She's like, oh, whoa, that's deep, man. And I was like, yeah, maybe, I guess, I don't know. And I got embarrassed, went to the bathroom. I was like, what the heck's going on? But, yeah. Yeah, let's just end it here, dude. So, yeah, bad preaching and bad theological arguments when you disregard context, not just surrounding the chapter, but even the entire narrative of what's going on here. So, yeah, I just encourage you, man, to turn your face to God wherever you are. Wherever you are, you're not too far gone. Hey guys, thank you so much for going on this journey with me. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, follow, and remember, there is more to life, and that is good news. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.